Hi everyone, my name is Gordon Calhoun, the historians and curators for the National Museum of the United States Navy with the Navy History and Heritage Command here in Washington, D.C. I'm here today to talk about Operation Crossroads, which was the testing of two atomic bombs out in the Southwest Pacific. It occurred July 1st, 1946, over 70 years ago, and we're doing this presentation here on July 1st. And this is the little slate you see here was one of the full director's clips, director's signs that the Navy produced to film this event. You have no doubt seen somewhere on the internet these pictures. This is the second test. This is they call the Baker test. There are two tests in Operation Crossroads of the two atomic bombs that they exploded here in the Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands of the South Pacific. You have seen these pictures. They are some of the most iconic pictures in American history. This is the underwater blast. We'll talk a little bit about the two nuclear weapons themselves that were set off by both the Army and the Navy. And so it's important to discuss what was the event, why did they do it, and what did they learn? Anything from this, from detonating a 23 kiloton nuclear explosion in the South Pacific? It was not just to create iconic pictures for us today. The reason behind it was to test. They became very clear after they dropped the bombs, the two bombs on Japan, and just 2 weeks after they dropped these bombs on Japan, it became very clear to the Joint Chiefs of Staff that what would happen if someone got a hold of this bomb and dropped it on a U.S. fleet. Now, realize the Soviet Union had not exploded their atomic bomb yet. We were not going to discover that the Russians had actually exploded a bomb until 1949. And the war's not even over yet, and you're already thinking, oh my gosh, what if someone were to explode a bomb on one of our fleets? What would happen? Now, everybody did know atomic bombs are, let's state the obvious, atomic bombs are very destructive. They just destroyed two cities in Japan. That is the obvious part. What is not so obvious are some of the other long-term effects. The actual, what it would do to a ship. But the radiation, a significant amount of information about radiation was not yet been discovered yet, and its effects on human tissue. I will say, as a disclaimer, before we go any further, if you get squeamish about animal testing, please turn off, because we will be talking about that. This is a scientific test based in 1940 standards. And if you love animals and are very squeamish about them, about laboratory tests, I won't show any graphic pictures, but do be aware that it is going to come up later in the presentation. So where did they locate it? Where did they decide to do these tests? They decided to do these tests in a place called the Bikini Atoll, and one of many small atolls in the Marshall Islands in the South Pacific. They had very strict guidelines about where they could do these tests. The Army Air Corps first didn't even want to do the test. They just wanted to take, it was suggested, why don't we just take the entire the remnants of the Japanese fleet and drop an atomic bomb on that and be done with it. But Admiral King, who was the Navy's legendary leader in World War II, pointed out, no, let's make this a practical test. Let's test it on our own ships that we're going to get rid of anyway. And so they had to choose a place that was far away from shipping lanes, far away from major commercial fishing stocks. They actually put this out for public comment. One thing about this test, it was very, very public. Many people weighed in on these tests, whether we should do these tests at all, which the Navy said, yes, we really should do these tests. But it was a very public test, and they had these guidelines. And even the commercial fishermen weighed in about their opinions about where it should be. And so they eventually chose this atoll in the Marshall Islands to do to explode the bombs. Now, there are people living there. There are 180 natives who did live on the Bikini Atoll, and they are actually asked nicely by the Navy, we're going to do something here They appealed to their patriotic sense of duty, that we're going to, they told them, we're going to do something here to defend the United States. Can you please kindly leave? We'll relocate you, and you'll be able to return someday. And they said, sure, we'll leave. So 180 of them packed up and left their homes. This is the Navy LCI on the day of their departure. And so once they were moved, the Navy and the Army formed something called Joint Task Force 1. They brought in an army, excuse the pun, of cameramen, of scientists, of gauges. There are some historians out there who will try to tell you that this particular test was just a showpiece for the U.S. military to show off to the Russians. There's proof right here that says this was more than a showpiece, that they were very serious, both the Army, Navy, and several other federal government agencies, including the Department of Agriculture, about what they could learn from these two tests. You can see in the upper left-hand corner, yes, Kilroy made a presence. If you look in the National Archives, you'll find the film, several films made during the Bikini Atoll test, during Operation Crossroads tests, that, and one of the films, one of the sailors very secretly sticks his hand out, starts writing the famous "Kilroy was here" on one of the test ships. The man in charge of it is Admiral Blandy. He is the Navy's point man on all special weapons during World War II, not just atomic weapons, but also any other kind of top secret or weapons that required research and development. And the gentleman on the right is probably going to be the more important person, at least when it comes down to the final results of the test. This is Dr. Stafford Warren. He is Colonel Stafford Warren in the United States Army. Before he worked with the Army Medical Corps, he was one of the nation's leading experts on the nuclear medicine, and he developed the mammogram that we use today for women's health. And he becomes the lead medical doctor for this entire operation on the effects of radiation. And that long term is what this test is going to be about. There is a hyper focus on the test did to the physical damage done to the ships. What is more important to learn about this operation is the effects, the long-term effects, even the medium-term effects, such as 1 week, 2 weeks out from the actual detonation of a bomb, had on human beings, because they just honestly did not know. They did not know a lot about what they were dealing with. But let's bring out the ships. They bring out an armada of ships, many of which were several veterans were sad to see go. The upper left-hand corner there, that is the USS Nevada, one of 3 American battleships, USS New York and Arkansas being the other 2. They brought out the aircraft carrier Saratoga. They brought out a light carrier. They brought out several destroyers, submarines, landing crafts, a lot of transport ships. They even brought out some foreign ships. They did bring out a few Japanese battleships, some of which were veterans of the Pearl Harbor raid. The German light cruiser Prince Eugen in the lower right-hand corner there was part of this test as well. The Army did participate as well. They wanted to see what would happen with their equipment in the nuclear explosion, and so they placed every single piece of equipment they could get their hands on and placed it aboard ships. This is the USS Saratoga, and you'll see various Army vehicles, M10 tank destroyers, armored cars, artillery pieces, a duck, and all to see what would happen in this. The picture on the left there are some of the transports that would be used for at anchor at the Pearl Harbor, and being ready, prepared to go out to the Bikini Atoll itself. And then lastly, and this is where I have the point about the animals, there were the animals. There were goats, there were pigs, there were Norwegian lab rats. You can see them in this picture, all used as part of the test to find out the effects of radiation. So the Army Air Corps is responsible for the first test. This is called the Able test. Happens on July 1st, 1946. A B-29 bomber. It's very similar to the ones that dropped the 2 bombs to the two B-29s that dropped the bombs on Japan. This one in particular was called Dave's Dream. It was operated by an experienced crew, a B-29 bomber crew, and they were to drop the bomb on Nevada. Let's go back just a couple slides here. You notice how Nevada is painted, looks orange. That was done on purpose, so the bombardier, when he came across the fleet, could see the target. Nonetheless, they still missed by several hundred yards. Nonetheless, being an atomic explosion, it really doesn't matter. This is our two photographs of the Able test. On the right there, those are sailors from the USS Fall River, a light cruiser. They were told to stay. All ships were told to stay away about at least 10 nautical miles away from the explosion. If you look, and sailors were told, if you had goggles, you had special polarized goggles, yes, you could look at the test. If you did not, you had to put, and they did several exercises, the trained sailors had to do this, you had to sit down and you had to put your arm, your head inside your arm to prevent the flash from blinding you. Like I said, they knew about some of the basics of what an atomic explosion could do. So they're not completely ignorant. However, we're going to find out they didn't know everything. And then the second test, the Baker test, this is the one that's a bit more famous, a bit more iconic in the photography, is an underwater test. This is the one that the Navy really insisted upon because they were really afraid that somebody could plant a depth charge or a bomb of some type below a fleet. And in many ways, the Navy was, I don't want to use the word scared, but they wanted to be prepared. I mean, it's quite the foresight to say that the enemy could have an atomic bomb 3 years before they actually confirmed that they have an atomic bomb. And so this is the Baker test. It was done right at the center of the fleet, and it was done 3 weeks after, July 25th, after the Able test. And all these photographs were done, these particular photographs were taken from Bikini Atoll itself with remote cameras. There was no one on the island itself when the explosions happened. The first two pictures there show that figure 41, that is just, it says frame 30. That's about 3 seconds after detonation. Maybe not even 3 seconds, maybe like 2 seconds. And then on the far right is a close-up shot of, you see the wave, the radioactive wave produced by the explosion that in some of the battleships, it's one of the Japanese battleships, Nagato is in the picture there, about to be engulfed by the wave. And then this is some of the effects. On the left there is one of the American battleships that had a truck on board. You see one Army soldier doing an inspection of it. On the right there is the light carrier USS Independence. It had actually caught on fire. Was right near the actual epicenter of the explosion itself. And eventually it was ripped to pieces quite a bit. You can see two sailors, yes, on the end of the bow there, standing looking at everybody. And then, most famously, the USS Saratoga eventually succumbed to injuries and sank with all of its equipment on board. And it sank with an even keel. It landed very gently at the bottom of the atoll, and we're going to see pictures of the effects of it. We'll do a little of the effects of the explosion. Immediately after both explosions, they did a washdown. This is what the procedure was, that they were going to just use normal washdown procedures like the ship was on fire. They went in with water hoses, high-pressure water hoses, and started washing the ships, all the ships down that were to try to get the radiation levels down. The plan was that they were not going to keep the ships there, the ones that were still afloat, that they were going to bring them back. But as you can see, that's the submarine USS Skate. You can see the sign there, very close. It says, "Keep clear, danger, very radioactive." I'm sure, though, the person who took the picture, though, if you're this close, you're getting doused with radiation. This is the more telling pictures. These are clips from a film that's on the National Archives website of two one officer, one sailor measuring the radiations on the radiation levels with a Geiger counter on the USS New York. Now you'll notice in the USS New York look physically just fine. And the captain of the New York, the last captain of the battleship New York, wanted to he looked at it and went, looks fine to me, let's take it home. And the doctors were like, no, I really don't think you should. Even though the ship physically looks fine, and the Geiger counters are picking up normal safe levels, we're not so sure about things. And they were rightfully to be afraid. The Geiger counters they had at the time did not pick up everything. It did not pick up plutonium in particular. And both of these bombs were the exact same type of bomb that dropped on Nagasaki. They were the Mark III Fat Man bomb, plutonium implosion type bomb, which did spread out microscopic levels of plutonium all over the atoll. And they found out later that the plutonium could not be picked up by the Geiger counters they had at the time. The animals, yes, most of them died. Most of them died a week later. Many of them did not die right away. Two that did survive, though. There was one goat and one pig jumped ship before the bomb went off. Sailors rescued them. Apparently convinced the commanding officer, can we keep them? They did, and they ended up being relocated to the National Zoo here in Washington, D.C. Most of the other goats and pigs did die. And you can see one sailor measuring the radiation level, particularly his neck. They're looking at the thyroid. That was one they considered one of the vulnerable places for radioactive poisoning. This particular fish is telling. This particular picture. This is a surgeon fish that is obviously been doused with radiation. Admiral Blandy was ready to, and other Navy and Army leadership were ready to do a third test, what they called the Charlie test. And because they believed the radiation levels were perfectly safe, that the washdowns work, and the radiation levels from both bombs were safe, and there was not as much to worry about. Let's go ahead and do a third test. Colonel Warren, the story goes, showed that this particular picture to Admiral Blandy and said, you need to look at this and reconsider about doing a third test. And the story is that Admiral Blandy saw this and went, right, we're going to wrap this up now. That the radiation levels had obviously not dropped off as fast as they thought, that the area was still too hot, and that they best just wrap up the whole task force and go home, which is what they ended up doing. When they did get home, they did do a wrap-up party. Navy loves cakes, and unfortunately, this was an unfortunate public relations. They had handled all the public relations issues up until now. This was not the greatest way to end it, though. Somebody on Blandy's staff decided to order the atomic cake, as it's since been called, with a mushroom cloud on top of a cake, and they held a celebration of sorts at the Army War College's Officers Club. That's Admiral Blandy and his wife doing the cake cutting ceremony. When the picture hit the papers, people went absolutely nuts about how tasteless this was. The Soviets even picked up on their propaganda network picked up on this, of how dare the Americans just laugh at something so serious, even though they're developing a nuclear bomb as we speak. Several peace activists, of course, denounced it as obscene and how dare you. And Secretary of the Navy Forrestal had to personally write to some of America's leading religious leaders, personally apologizing for this cake. And the smilings and everything else, that we'll never do anything like that again, I rest assure you. And that put the controversy to rest once Secretary Forrestal got involved. But what are some of the lessons learned? First lesson is we need more tests. This is on the left there, it's Operation Hardtack. It is a bomb, several bombs that were exploded in that same area of the Bikini Atoll, climaxing with the Castle Bravo test, which is the most powerful bomb that the United States ever developed. And the immediate effect, though, was we need to do what happens when a ship is nearby an atomic explosion. And the radiation lab, Navy's radiation labs came up with this idea of, well, we need a better way of washing down the ships. Just using regular fire hoses, high pressure hoses we use for damage control purposes will not work. We need to come up with a whole new system to wash down the ship of any kind of radioactive debris. They acknowledge right in their report that if a ship is right near the atomic explosion, it's going to sink. You're never going to develop a ship strong enough to stop an atomic explosion. They just acknowledge that from the start. And the Navy acknowledges that from the start. So unlike previous wars where they're always trying to design a ship to outduel a new piece of ordnance, this is the first time that the navies, United States Navy and other navies, just recognize there is no way, an atomic weapon is it, and there's no way we're going to be able to stop it if the ship is right next to the explosion. What we can stop, though, is the radiation effects. Remember, that is the most important, probably the most important lesson learned out of this whole operation. And so USS Worcester, there on the left, light cruiser, becomes the Navy's first ship to have a washdown system that, for many of you who have been in the Navy, you have seen these systems. They're still installed both for damage control purposes as well as washing off the ship of any potential radioactive fallout for any biological weapons or chemical weapons. And then there has been archaeology done, underwater archaeology done on the shipwrecks. Colleagues of the National Park Service have did a major study on the Bikini Atoll wrecks in the 1980s. This is the USS Saratoga there. They're one of the artist's conceptions of what the ship looks like today. On the right, you can see the back part of the flight deck has this big dent in it, like Godzilla stepped on it. The USS Arkansas, Battleship Arkansas, up in the upper left corner, was completely flipped over and still rests there today. Most ships still rest there today. And then several other ships were towed home back to the United States, where they're eventually sunk as targets off the west coast, or they were towed to nearby atolls to allow them to become a little less hot. Well, the Prince Eugen was towed to a different atoll, and it did suffer physical damage from the explosions that eventually she sank. And they removed a propeller from it. They gave that back to the Germans. Our command has the bell off the Prince Eugen, which was removed from the ship before the ship was used in the test. And then later was discovered that the ship might be leaking oil. So the U.S. Navy salvage teams, working with the government of the Marshall Islands, did go out to the Prince Eugen and pump all of the fuel oil off the ship. And so, so you would not ruin what looks, even today, it looks like an absolute paradise. For the resources, two places I'll recommend. Obviously, go to the Navy History and Inheritance Command's website, history.navy.mil. Search Operation Crossroads. You'll see several photographs, documents, artwork that my colleagues in the Navy Art Collection are going to be talking about later. And then the National Park Service, if you search for archaeology of the atomic bomb, you'll find their report about it that they did in the 1980s. I understand the University of Delaware just did a study on the wrecks not too long ago. They haven't, as far as I know, have not publicly released their report yet, but I've read a little bit about it, and I look forward to seeing what they have. If you have any questions, please either email them to us at the museum or wherever we end up posting this particular film. Thank you very much for listening.